Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast lovers. Happy New Year! Well, I have just celebrated 2 years anniversary with the Shipping Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the bonus episode that I released in between episode 64 and this episode number 65. I have been speaking to more than 65 people in 2 years' time. But that is nothing compared to how many interesting people there are in the shipping industry and whom I got on my target list. Today I'm going to introduce you to Roger Adamson from Futurenautics. I went back to Copenhagen in March. As you might remember, I was there late January as well. But 22nd and 23rd of March, there was a conference organized called Shipping 2030, where Kate Adamson, who you can listen to in episode 35, was the chair and the excellent moderator of this conference, which was focused on the future. I came into a room full of like-minded people. Finally, I thought, there are more people in this world that thinks like I do. So I made a couple of interviews, and I will share them with you from now on. Speaking of guests, I am planning to go to Oslo this fall. I haven't set a date yet, but I'm open and interested if you have suggestions for me on people I should interview when I come to Oslo. Back to Roger Adamson. It's an interesting conversation again. Futurenautics have made a survey about digitalization and how much money the shipping industry thinks they're going to invest in new techniques going forward. I can only say that ship owners and managers are now interested and aware of the digital transformation, according to Roger's survey. However, they are not willing to spend any money on it. Surprise! Well, I leave it to Roger to further expand on what the conclusions was from the survey. And I will include a link to the actual survey for downloading in the show notes of this episode. This is Roger Adamson for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Roger Adamson. I am the Chief Executive of Futurenautics Maritime.
So what is Futurenautics Maritime?
We are a small consultancy which is based in London, in the UK, and we contextualize technology trends for the shipping industry. So the business has 3 parts. One is a journal, Futurenautics Journal, which you've probably seen. The second element is research. We do a lot of research in the maritime sector for suppliers and ship operators, suppliers who are looking to introduce products and services into the industry or are looking to change their product and service offering. So we help them with some market research, get some hard data about what ship owners and operators think of their solutions, the challenges that they face, and we feed that back to the suppliers. And the final part of the business is we're involved in consultancy, where we help supply side and also ship owners and operators with their technology strategies. So we work with their boards to develop their digital vision going forward.
So how did you enter the shipping industry?
That's a very good question. When I was a young lad, being brought up by the sea, I wanted to go to sea. And that was just at the time that the British Merchant Navy dwindled in size, and a lot of people told me I would be better off going to university and getting a degree rather than going to sea. And so that's what I did. And I trained in Liverpool, and I specialized in naval architecture and shipping business. as well as hydrographic surveying, and wanted to go into shipbuilding. But of course, the shipbuilding industry in the UK had deserted the UK shores by that time. So I ended up in IT and communications. And so I worked for Inmarsat for about 8 years, and then went on to run one of their subsidiary software companies, a company called Ridex, which did optimized email. We sold that business with Inmarsat in 2005, and since that time I've been in consultancy, mainly based around helping the supply side of the industry understand ship owners and operators and how they were using technology. And we kind of formalized that and changed direction and created Futurenautics at the end of 2013.
So what are the biggest changes that you have seen within the shipping industry during your time here?
Well, connectivity has changed radically since I started, and as connectivity is my background, I guess that's where I've put a lot of my focus. And I can remember training people on email. When I started working for Inmarsat, I ran the training program for them, and we used to take very large satellite terminals around the world and train people on this new strange concept called email, and told them that one day that would actually be commonplace on ships. So I've seen, that very low speed, high cost, narrow bandwidth satellite connectivity develop over the years. We've seen the advent of VSAT, which is bringing some what the maritime industry terms as broadband, but not what land users would term as broadband, to the market. And then, of course, now into an era of high throughput satellites. We've just seen the launch of Intelsat and their Epic satellites, and also Inmarsat Fleet Express, which is bringing a lot of the barriers to some of the wider technology trends that we see down, and is allowing ship owners and operators to properly connect with their vessels. And interestingly, it's not not now just about satellite connectivity. What we're also seeing is some disruptive technologies, such as KNL Networks, who won the Innovation Award here at Shipping 2030 with their cognitive HF radio. So an HF service that we saw in Globe Wireless days 10, 15 years ago, which we thought had run its course, has now been reinvented by some very clever Finnish guys. And of course, lots of talk about other mesh networks. We're seeing Wi-Fi systems, coastal Wi-Fi systems coming in, and things like Project Loon, nanosats, low Earth orbit satellite networks coming in as well. So I think going forward, the options in terms of connectivity for ship owners and operators will be a lot more varied than it is even today. And that really can only be a good thing when it comes to moving forward to more smart and eventually autonomous and, of course, unmanned ships.
So I don't even have to ask you what you think about autonomous ships.
Autonomous ships, I think, are going to happen. Unmanned ships, I'm convinced, also will happen. The economic argument is the one that usually wins, and removing 40% of the cost of operating a vessel by taking the crew off is a big incentive. It'll be a little while before we get there, and of course there will be various types of vessels which will never actually be unmanned, I'm quite sure, but we will see a significant portion of the fleet becoming unmanned and also more standardized. And I think that really helps the shipping industry refocus on where it should be looking, which is actually satisfying its customer demand and not speculating on assets. So a more standardized fleet may in the future lead to there being more ships, which would, of course, allow them to call at more ports around the world. And that can only be a good thing for charterers and shippers of goods globally.
I speak to people who are on ships, who are seagoing personnel, and they are a bit afraid of the term unmanned ships. What happens with our jobs and things like that?
It's an interesting question, and this year we're doing a research project into precisely that issue, looking at how the structure of employment will change within the shipping industry as we see the introduction first of more autonomous vessels and probably some form of reassessment of safe manning levels for autonomous vessels, and of course eventually as we move to unmanned ships. Without wanting to prejudice my own research, my gut feel is that we will see vessels routinely taken out of service to perform the maintenance. So that standardization that we talked about will lead to much more reliable systems on board the vessel, which would allow us to operate unmanned vessels. And then you would routinely take those vessels out of service and they would be maintained on shore. So from an engineering perspective, I would say that actually potentially we will need the same number of engineers that we have today, maybe even more, but they will be shore-based and they will do an 8-hour shift in port when the vessel is out of service, do the maintenance, and then it will go back into autonomous unmanned operation. From a navigation perspective, I think that's probably where the risk is for deck officers, although there will be certain classes of ships that we will always want some physical manned presence on board. And I think, the danger is that sailors become a bit of a dying breed. And having wanted to be one myself, I can appreciate what that must mean for people who have salt running through their blood. And I wonder, whether we will be a bit like horses. They were a mainstay of propulsion for us for many years, and now horse riding is purely a leisure pursuit. And I can see that the danger as we move to automation is that sailing becomes a leisure pursuit only.
How terrible, in a way. And
in a way, but
way.
then shipping is not unique in this in the sense that automation and the drive of technology is going to lead to a wholesale automation of jobs, a high percentage of white-collar jobs, a high percentage of blue-collar jobs as well. And that's raised huge questions for society in general. And we've started to see in Finland trials of universal basic income and the thought process around that. So to say that shipping is unique is not true. This disruption will be happening across every industry. So every industry will have to reevaluate what it does with its workforce. And I don't think at this stage there are any easy answers.
No, and things happen fast now.
They happen very fast. Yeah.
We are attending the Shipping 2030 and we heard someone say, you need to reevaluate what you said 2 weeks ago.
Yes. Yeah. And uncertainty, we have to get used to uncertainty. And as our chair said, we're all tuna now. We have to swim to stay alive. And uncertainty, volatility are going to be watchwords going forward for every industry, not just shipping.
Futurenautics have done a survey.
Yeah, we've just undertaken a survey with Ericsson, and we wanted to understand a few things about the industry, and that was all based around digital infrastructure, investment, and initiatives that were happening in the shipping industry. So we wanted to put some hard data around the anecdotal evidence that we hear and that people tell us. So we looked at what companies were spending currently on digital innovations, how that was affecting their business, and how important digital initiatives were to the industry. So we surveyed just over 700 respondents, about 50% from Europe, 25% from Asia, and 25% roughly from the Middle East and North America. Ship owners and operators, maritime suppliers, regulatory bodies, and research and academic institutions. And the headline results, really there, 85% of respondents said that digital initiatives were crucial to the financial and market success of their businesses. And that was 85% of all respondents. We hear a lot of that Actually, ship owners and operators are not really interested in digital initiatives, but the survey found that 73% of ship operator respondents thought that digital initiatives were of crucial importance to the market success of their business, or the financial and market success of their businesses going forward. So I think we can lay to rest the fact that ship operators are interested and are engaged in this digital debate. So that proved that everybody's interested. Are they spending a lot on it? No. At the moment, the findings are that 57% of maritime companies in general are spending less than $25,000 per annum on digital initiative investment, which in comparison to other industries is extremely low. There was a small percentage, about 11%, who were spending more than $1 million per annum, and that was the group that grew the largest. Actually, we're seeing by 2020, 22% of companies will be spending more than $1 million on their digital initiatives. So they think it's important, but they're not actually investing in those digital initiatives at the moment. And that came down to a lack of understanding of what digital initiatives were, what they could deliver to the business, a lack of leadership within the organization, a lack of senior management buy-in, concerns about cybersecurity, obviously of moving to a more digital way of operation, and lack of funding as well, and lack of access to funding for digital initiatives.
Of course, that is connected to the leadership and the buy-in on.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And yesterday you also showed something about organizations already now buying data or sort of getting that into their organization, and what the value of that was.
Yes, there was some interesting. We asked respondents what data they collected, what data they actually purchased, and what was the value of that data. And there was a fairly broad spread of data which was collected, and that was collected more around their customers and their employees, as you probably expect. What they were purchasing most of was maritime market information data. But when you asked them about the value, when you looked at the value that they saw in that data, then that threw up some really interesting and curious results. And I tend to focus there on where they didn't see any value rather than where they did. And the places that they didn't see any value was in their employee data, or they saw little or no value in that, and also in global economic data, which is quite a curious result, because when you talk to ship owners and operators, they believe that they are at the mercy of global macroeconomic trends and cycles, a very cyclical nature of the industry that we're in. And so you would automatically assume that they were myopically focused on acquiring and understanding global economic data, but that seems not to be the case. And also the employee data, I think, really throws up some concerns, especially as we're seeing GDPR regulations coming in May 2018. That is going to put a lot of emphasis on keeping your employee data very safe. And that's something that's going to probably change that view of the value of that employee data. So,
but did you ask them why they had these views? Or?
No, that would be the next stage, is to go back and understand that more fully. So that research, as we said, we published with Ericsson yesterday. It's free to download from Futurenautics website, and the report's freely available. And later this year, probably around September time, we'll be releasing another report containing some more data around that digital initiative, what we call Waypoint Digital Survey, which will split out the supply and the ship owning side of the respondents, so we can do a comparison between how those two groups view their digital initiatives going forward.
So what is your gut feeling? Which part of the shipping industry will be firstly hit by the digitalization?
Well, I think we're seeing disruption and digitalization hitting container shipping already. We're seeing some of those changes to the way that we manufacture goods and the way we consume goods already have an immediate effect on the container industry. So from the consumption point of view, with millennials, Gen Ys, Gen Zs we're moving very much towards access over ownership. People don't want necessarily to have music anymore. They want to have access to music. They don't necessarily want cars. They want access to cars. And then we're seeing it also on the manufacturing side. We are seeing everything from additive manufacturing or 3D printing, which is allowing manufacturers to relocate production at the point of demand rather than where labor supplies were cheap and then shipping it back across the world. And also things like the circular economy, where products are now being devised and developed and built which have a use cycle rather than a life cycle. So we're starting to reuse various elements of that. And that all is starting to have an impact on container shipping. And we're starting to see in that sector global GDP growth decouple from seaborne trade volumes. And I think that's fairly well recognized now within the industry. And a lot of the technologies that are underpinning that are driven by, digitalization. So that's where we're seeing it immediately. There will be less impact, and it will be some way down the road before we get into the bulk, the dry bulk market, before that gets disrupted. But that industry has its own problems at the moment. I think what we have to understand is that we shouldn't be treating shipping as an individual industry. It becomes part of a wider integrated transport network, which starts at the point of production and ends at the point of consumption. And there's probably 8 or 10 stages in there, and one of which is shipping. Now, shipping is a very important stage in there at the moment, but it's not the only stage in there. And there are a lot of vested interests around shipping and the handling of cargoes and actually booking cargoes onto vessels. And I think, digitalization will bring transparency, which will end up disintermediating some of those players. And that is something, again, is not unique to shipping. We've seen it in other industries, and that is a force which will happen. The degree to which how quickly it happens is another question, but it will come, and there are a lot of players within that value chain that will be disintermediated because the level of transparency will cut them out.
So could you explain disruption? It has been a buzzword here during these days, and not everyone put the same thing into that word.
Yes, I mean, disruption to me means taking an existing model, a business model, and radically changing that and the business processes which go around that. And technology very often underpins the ability for companies to change their business models radically. So we've seen it already with the likes of Google and Amazon and Tesla and so forth, who are coming in and who are looking at industries, who are looking at sectors in a completely different way and applying a different logic to the incumbent players that are in there. Very often they are fairly agile businesses that can move quickly and think quickly, and incumbent industry players often are of a traditional mindset and find it very difficult to move quickly.
So do you think the disruption of the shipping industry will come from within or from without?
I think it'll be a mixture of both. I'm sure we will get some very disruptive players from outside the industry, look at it and go, this industry is inefficient and that inefficiency is my margin, and they will come in. And then we will see there will be some, as there always is, there will be some incumbent players who actually get it and who can change their business model quickly and embrace the digital technology and move very quickly, and who will stay in. I think it will be a very dangerous time. We're entering a very dangerous time now because technology is moving at an exponential rate. It's moving very, very quickly. So for those incumbent players, they really have to be creating their digital vision now and understand where their business is going to be in the next 3 and 5 years and how they're going to use technology to make that digital transformation within their organization. And from our research, they have to be spending more than $25,000 a year in order to be able to do that. That's the first step.
Yeah, and I hear about organizations who are either hiring someone to come in and do it for them, or they are giving the younger people within their organization the possibility to come in and have some influence on the elderly generation who is not as adaptive as they are. What is your best advice to organizations how to do this?
Well, what the survey told us was that actually the way that maritime companies are approaching this at the moment is to bring in expertise from outside and collaborate with other players in order to be able to accelerate their digital initiatives. And that certainly gets them up and running. But I think, companies have to be bringing in that digital talent within their organization. And it's going to be digital talent that hasn't been associated with shipping before. I think what's so interesting about the Shipping 2030 conference that we've both been attending the last couple of days is that for the first time I've seen 4 chief digital operators from ship operating companies in attendance, and all of them, I think, actually have been probably in place for less than 6 months. So it's very encouraging that we've now got chief digital officers or chief data officers within those organizations. And interestingly, every single one of them has come from a non-shipping background, bar one, I believe. And that can only be a good thing, to get some fresh thinking in, and also somebody whose life has been built around, digital transformations.
And I see some females. So finally,
and females,
maybe
yes,
we can
of course.
open up for having more women in the
Absolutely,
industry.
Yes, absolutely. We need more creative thinkers, and we need more women. I mean, we need, creative thinkers first, and actually a lot of those are women. And if they happen to be women, that's very good. But what the industry really needs is good creative thinkers.
Yeah, and collaboration. That is also a buzzword that we have been hearing a lot.
Yes, and that covers a range of scenarios. I mean, we're talking about collaboration in terms of bringing in expertise within the organization for digital transformation within the organization. But that can mean a lot of other things. And, we're hearing a lot now about collaboration, and that can mean collaborating in terms of projects and collaborating and bringing together data sets that from various players within the value chain, which together they can analyze and find value in.
It could also be a triple helix, like authorities, ship owners, universities working together in a collaborative way.
Yes, yeah. And I think one of the interesting things that data and collaboration brings is that move towards smart regulation, because we have to get quicker at regulating this industry, or it will become self-regulating. My view is that probably we won't be able to regulate ourselves fast enough, so it will regulate itself. But there's a lot that we can do to cut inefficiency out of that regulation process just by gathering and analyzing in real time data that is generated on board ships. So a very obvious example of that will be the emissions that are coming out of the stack. If we can, put a sensor in place that records that can be verified and then provided to regulatory authorities in real or near real time, then actually we don't need to send out drones or inspect vessels to look at whether they are in compliance within, when they're in ECAs at all. That could be something that we then target our inspections at those vessels that aren't transparent, that we can't see.
But that will take a little bit of boldness from the regulators' point of view.
Yes. Yeah.
So can you see the bold people there?
It'll take boldness from the regulators and also boldness from the ship operators as well, because nobody really wants to share that data unless there is as we talked about yesterday, a digital dividend at the end of it, which means that if I'm operating a vessel that I can prove that it's compliance for so many months or so many years, then I can look at getting, then my risk profile, I can present a better risk profile to my insurers and hopefully negotiate better rates on insurance, and also potentially open up access to finance, which we know is a big problem for ship operators at the moment.
This comes to visibility, I think. How could the shipping industry become more visible?
How does the shipping industry become more visible? My question is, does it need to become more visible? At the end of the day, I think, the shipping industry's got other things to worry about in terms of we need to satisfy the end customer. And, I'm a ship nerd. I love ships. I spent a lot of time designing ships as a trainee naval architect. But at the end of the day, when I say we have to raise the visibility of shipping, I don't necessarily know that that's a goal that we need to go after. My feeling is that if the transport network works properly, is the trucking industry looking at raising the profile of trucks? Probably not. Is the airline industry looking at raising the profile of aircraft? Possibly, because we have consumers on board of those aircraft, and it's about the journey that you go on. At the end of the day, shipping, like trucking, is actually, for many people, not a particularly sexy industry. It's got some really very cool technology in it, but we have more important things to worry about at the moment than its visibility.
But how would we recruit the next generation then, if they don't know about us and all the cool stuff that we are actually doing?
Well, I think we have to. I think where the recruitment will come from will be the cool organizations that come out of the next generation of shipping. People want to work for Google, they want to work for Amazon, they want to work for cool tech companies. And if shipping is a cool tech company, then we will be able to attract that talent. I think also we have to look at the jobs that Gen Ys, Gen Zs, Gen Alphas will have. It's entirely possible that they will have 30 or 40 careers during their lifespan. So shipping might be a part of that for a few years, and they may move on to other industries. This whole idea of a job for life is something that we've left behind now. So they are looking at portfolio careers.
But still, we are competing with every other industry for that period of time that they want to spend with us.
Absolutely. And that's why, we have to become tech savvy and we have to become cool.
So that is the answer then?
Yeah.
I think transparency will also lead to visibility at the end.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. The more transparent the industry becomes, the greater the visibility there as well.
And that will also be good for cargo owners and people buying transport at sea.
Yes. Transparency is one of the main things that we need within shipping at the moment. And that plays very much into the sustainability idea that we will be able to look possibly through blockchain in a supermarket and see how that piece of fruit or that box of cereal has arrived in our supermarkets and how sustainable that supply chain was, where it was produced, how sustainable the producer of those goods were, etc., etc.
And you also got the politicians. They don't know about shipping either. So maybe that would be a reason to be more visible. What maritime sector delivers to each individual country, and then therefore maritime policy is very much dictated around the value that it delivers to that particular country, and the politicians are very often guided by that. I think where we see some of the good examples in Scandinavia is where there's collaboration taking place between clusters and between countries. But that's quite a unique situation. And actually, if you were to drive some of this change through, then actually getting those politicians and governments to think more laterally about a transport strategy, which was more global, would be advantageous. But again, a lot of this ecosystem will become
regulating, I'm sure, over time. And, then again, you have to question what value do those politicians actually bring and how much could they influence an ecosystem which is regulating itself.
So who would you be interested in listening to in an episode of the Shipping Podcast?
I would be interested in listening to somebody, to two sets. One is cargo owners, people who ship cargoes around the world. What do they think of the service that they are being delivered by the shipping industry at the moment? And the other set of companies would be technology companies outside of shipping. So we had Google, for example, at our event in Posidonia in 2016. And one of the questions to them from the floor was, you're probably not interested in the maritime or shipping industry. It's probably too niche for you. And their response was, well, if we could find a transformative purpose to become involved in shipping, then we would. So talking to those guys and understanding what that transformative purpose is it about cutting emissions? Is it about is it about making this, shipping integrated within a wider logistics channel? Is it autonomous unmanned ships? What would their view be?
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I would like to have an answer to that question as well. Thank you very much, Roger, for your time.
You're very welcome.
I'm looking forward to reading the survey. I find that on futurenautics.com.
Yes, futurenautics.com, and the report is called Waypoint Digital 2017.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roger. I think this episode, our conversation, sums up, in a way, why I'm doing these interviews, especially when it comes to innovation. I want the shipping industry to be the best on that as well. I know we can be, and I find it so interesting to see how the forerunners are now making their way into the real digital transformation. It's exciting times, and they have all got a strategy for their digital transformation, as you always have to have. I am currently working on digital communications strategy, and to have that, you need to know what is the goal, where are you heading with your business. Before you know that, you can't have a communication strategy. So it's a catch-22. You need to know what you're doing, you need to know where you're going, and you need to set goals. Just as I do with my little podcast. So if you have listened to my bonus episode and the interview with Cleopatra in episode 64, you know that I have set up both a YouTube channel and a Patreon page. Have you visited it? I need 100 people to follow me on YouTube before I can apply for a real name to my channel, like the Shipping Podcast. So could you please go to YouTube and find the Shipping Podcast and like it? I can also include a link to that in these show notes. I just need your help to do that. If you think that this podcast is worth something to you, if you think you want to support my job, I am trying to spread the word about an industry that I am really passionate about. Then you can go to my Patreon page and you can set up either a monthly amount or a lump sum that you are willing to share with me, for me to develop the podcast even more. No obligations, but if you think it's worth something to you, please go there. patreon.com/shippingpodcast. I am a bit busy now, again. I don't know why, but things are just happening all the time. I've been asked so many times to have some sort of coaching in how to become like me. Well, I think that is rather hard, but then again, I'm willing, of course, to teach other people how to become successful as communicators in different online channels within the maritime community. So that is what I'm working on at the moment. Which means I can't find more time to do this right now. So, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.